Thirsty political groups have pulled off over 1,500 book bans in schools across the U.S.
That's the alarm about a set of measures that they say target teaching and writing related to LGBTQ issues, race, and more broadly, freedom of speech. Around
Critically acclaimed graphic novel Mouse. It is a true story about the horrors of the Holocaust by Art Spiegelman, and it depicts Jews as mice and Nazis as cats. One school board member commenting on the book saying,
you know, what I say to kids, particularly high school kids who can't find it in the library, is if you can't find it, run to the library, the grown-up library, or to the bookstore and find out what it is that you don't want them, what they don't want you to read.
It kind of goes along with what I just said. I don't think censoring anything is going to change anything. I mean, I think, we live in a world with, a variety of people, and just to embrace people and their differences, and, censoring anything isn't going to make it go away. It's, really, I feel like a lot of times censorship draws more attention to it, which is kind of a good thing in some regards as well. And so those people who are trying to censor are really kind of doing the opposite of what they're trying to do, because they're drawing more attention to the book or whatever it is they're trying to censor. It's just not going to change anything. And I think it just leads to better conversations if you just let things be how they should be and not try to cover up or change or hide how, many people truly are in this world. I think that's the beautiful thing about our world. We live with, a variety of people, religions, genders, and it just hurts our world to censor it.
I think it was in 8th grade when we were asked to write an essay. It was supposed to be about, what would your career choice like to be? And I really, at that time, was thinking, I do not want to be stuck behind a desk all day. And so I'd written an essay about wanting a more kind of outdoorsy working job. And I clearly struck a nerve with my English teacher, and she made me stay after school and told me, this is serious. And I was like, oh, wow, I wrote this essay, and I have clearly, touched your button. And this is, she was really, really angry. And she made me apologize for having written it. I'm like, oh, wow. Oh, the books that I love the most, and sounds really cliche, I completely loved that whole Little House on the Prairie series. I read every one of those over and over and again. And I think about that a lot, because a lot of times you'll have teachers say, oh, you've already read that book. And I'm like, well, come on, can't you have an old friend over to your house more than once? You don't say you've already been to my house once, you can't come again. And I just remember that I read those books over and over and over again. Our family read a lot. I can remember when we were kids in the summertime, other kids would go to exotic camps, and we called it readers camp, and there were rules that you were only allowed to drink iced tea, and there should be no talking. This was a time of basically silent reading for an afternoon.
When I first went to college, I knew I wanted to be a teacher, but I thought elementary teacher. For really most of my life, I have a younger brother, and I would always play school with him and teach him. But when I went to school, you take, classes that prepare you for teaching, or, you're exposed to it. So you go and observe, and I observed a couple elementary classrooms, and I just thought, I don't know if this is for me. Like I like being around kids, but I just didn't know if you kind of have to be on, and not that I'm not happy every day, but it's like a different dynamic, I feel like, in the elementary classroom. So I had friends in college who were English majors and English education majors, and they were talking about how they really enjoyed that. So I switched my major because I had enjoyed English, and I thought if I was going to teach high school, that would be the subject that I would teach. So it was kind of just by chance and process of elimination. I tried some things, I didn't really like it, and then I switched it up. And it wasn't a huge transition to do that because I was already an education major. So I just had to add like the English major, and I wasn't too far along. So it didn't, hinder me from getting done any, sooner. So as soon as I switched, I knew that's what I wanted to do.
I saw particularly my middle school librarian in my own school seemed like she was such a vibrant, interesting person, and I seemed like she really got into like working with kids and all this kind of thing. And I'm like, oh, I so want to do that. And then they set me up to do a job shadow with a librarian, only it wasn't that kind of librarian. It was like somebody who worked in a newspaper and basically like clipped out newspaper articles and put them in a file folder, and it looks so boring. And I'm like, oh, I want nothing to do with this. And then I got into teaching, had been teaching a while, and I could see the cool librarian across the hall at the middle school was the same person that I had, not actually the same person, but similar to. I'm like, okay, it is a cool job. I do still want to do that. Forget that crazy job shadow. Put that out of your head. I really do want to be a school librarian.
So I've taught sophomores for several years. I've taught honor sophomores, regular sophomores. I've taught all the grade levels, but in the most recent years, it's been sophomores and then AP literature. So for sophomore English, we read Night by Elie Wiesel, which is a memoir about the Holocaust. We read Things Fall Apart. We're just reading that for the first time this year, teaching that for the first time this year, which is about African culture during the British colonization. So we're, students are learning a lot about that. And then we just do a variety of short stories, and it's pretty traditional to like English 9. English 10 is kind of an extension of English 9, like what you learn there. You're just practicing those skills more. So AP literature, of course, is advanced course for seniors only. It's only offered to seniors. And we read Shakespeare, so we read Macbeth, we read Frankenstein, Invisible Man, and then the students have a choice novel at the end, which could include 1984, To Kill a Mockingbird, Things Fall Apart, and Hamlet. So there's a variety of texts taught in that class as well.
Librarians are a crucial part of the education system because everybody thinks that if you have a bunch of books on a shelf, that's the same as having a curated collection, and it is definitely not. And that is what you have in a school library, is a curated collection. And it's also a curated space. We give real careful thought to, like, how's the furniture arranged? How, what makes this a welcoming and inviting place for people to be, but also a place that we can supervise you. We also select items to help augment curricular things that you're doing, so that like if you're going to be working on a particular project, research project, new novel, whatever it is, we're going to help your classroom teacher, and you probably never see that happen, that we're going to help them find materials to do that. If your teacher's playing an audio production of one of the books that you're reading, chances are I help them come across that. The first time I had to deal with it was the very first year I worked here. Manga was just coming onto the scene, and I decided, you know what? Let's get a manga title. And so I bought one, and the one got challenged the very first year. And at that point, we didn't have a challenge policy in place. I sent the book over to the superintendent, and I'm like, this kid doesn't, Mom says this book shouldn't be in the library. She believes it to be pornographic. And if you're familiar with the title, it was Ranma 1/2 Volume 1. And in the story, Ranma is a character who, if they are splashed, and I'm going to get the gender flipped on this, I believe if they are splashed with cold water, they are present as female, and if they're in warm water, they present as male. And so there is a scene in the bathhouse where somebody's joking around and pours a bucket of cold water on the character, and suddenly there we are naked as a young woman from the waist up. And this is the scandal. It was like a single tiny image on, I think, page 59 of the book. And the superintendent said, hey, it's okay for you, we can put a note that your kid can't check this out, but you don't get to decide for everybody else. This book is going to stay. And so my principal handed me the book back, and it went back on the shelf. So that was the first one I had. And I would say I've had a book challenge about every year the whole time I've been here. Okay, so what happens, or what happened, is somebody has to submit a challenge. Well, usually what happens is somebody walks in and says, hey, I don't think you should have this book in the library. And I said, oh, well, if that's how you feel, here's the challenge form that you need to fill out and submit. And the challenge form requires that you've read the whole book. And it asks very specifically, what are you objecting to and what would you like to see as a result? And I want to say the three things that can be as a result is like, the book is restricted for my child, the book is restricted for certain grade levels, or the book is removed from the library.
So Invisible Man is written by Ralph Ellison. It was published in the 1950s, but it takes place in the 1930s. So it's about a young Black man who is excited to start his journey after high school. He's recognized as a young man for his public speaking abilities. And so he's asked to speak in front of a group of men to earn a scholarship for an all-Black college, which he's excited to receive and go to. And, during this time period, that wasn't a rare thing to just have separate schools, colleges. So he, at the very beginning of the book, it starts right away with, the injustice or racism that exists in the world that he lives in. He's giving this speech in front of, a group of white men in particular, and they're not really interested in his speech. They're more interested in him being a form of entertainment. So he and other young Black men are fighting in this ring, literally boxing. And, they do what they're told because they want this reward. In his case, a scholarship. He ends up getting the scholarship. He goes to college. He encounters a lot of obstacles in college, especially with the president of the college. He gets kicked out of the college and then heads to New York, where there's more opportunity. He thinks he's going to go back to college. That doesn't necessarily happen for him. And he starts to recognize how invisible he is. So the title of the book isn't literal. He's not literally invisible. It's just that nobody sees him for who he is. They see him as, a Black man in the world.
In my opinion, it's about the feeling of being invisible when people only see you for, what they can use you for or what you can help them with. They don't really see you as a person. They see you as a tool that they can have to move forward in life. And whatever they need done, that's what you are. They don't see you for an actual, true being or human that has a life and they can care for.
It's a part of our history, for sure. Definitely shows what life was like before and leading up to the Civil Rights Movement. It gives you more of a perspective on what Black people had to deal with back in the day, how they were being treated by white people. Even the people that seemed like they wanted to help them were not being helpful at all, but had a manipulative agenda against them. So it's definitely a piece of our history. It's very important. It's a classic banned book because, you know, it's written by a minority. And I think it's a very important piece of literature to read because it shows you the perspective of the African American society in Harlem during that time period. And that is something that me as a white woman, I did not know. I had not seen that before. You know, we touch on it here and there, but I think it's important for that to be a part of our curriculum just as much as any white literature is.
Yes, I absolutely think it's important to teach this book and books like these. I think we lose representation when we remove books like these, especially for, you know, not just people of color, Black people, since it's about a Black man. But there's this quote that I actually read to my students at the beginning of before we start reading the book, that kind of draws a point or makes a point of the purpose of this book, which I really like, and we kind of focus on as we read the book, which says, invisibility is Ellison's central metaphor, a profound explanation of what it is like in the Black experience to feel alienated. Invisibility speaks for all of us, for anyone who sits on the margin of society, who feels voiceless, whose humanity is not acknowledged. So I feel like marginalized students in general would lose that representation if we didn't teach books like this. So though it's about, you know, particular individuals' experience during the 1930s, it speaks for anyone who, you know, feels invisible. And so I feel like if we remove this book, we would lose a lot of that representation.
When books are getting banned, I feel like it should really be like a really valid reason. It has to be like, it's unreadable. Like it has nothing to do with what, you know, the natural world or what's happening. It has no, it's not gonna help anybody when they read it. And I feel like Invisible Man, it points out a lot of things in society that need to be addressed. And a lot of books that are banned are just, you know, books that people don't like because it might go against what they believe, or it might be too much for them to handle at this time when it's really just reality.
Well, you're blocking important points of view, important perspectives. There are many important themes in that book that we don't get from any other piece of literature that we read. Anything else that I've ever read. It's different. You get different perspectives, different important themes, and blocking that, well, to me, it's gonna, like, it wouldn't make a big difference to me because of my race and my gender. But to somebody else, and I can see that, I can feel like the empathy towards people of different color, their voices being blocked. I think that getting rid of the book, well, it just doesn't make any sense, and it would just hurt us more than it would help us. It would show that we have a bias in race. First of all, we don't read that much African American literature. We read one in sophomore year. We read some poetry every now and then, but this is definitely the longest piece of literature I've ever read by an African American person. And so taking that away, what does that say about us? What does that say about how we feel about African American literature? Just because of one chapter, one paragraph, one sentence.
I warn the students that there are some disturbing scenes coming. So I don't give many details because I know we're going to talk about it. I just, you know, give them a slight warning. What you're about to read is going to be very disturbing. And I just kind of leave it at that. Let them read, and then we come back and discuss it. I don't just gloss over it. I don't, you know, summarize it, because I think it's important to read even the uncomfortable things. Because that's kind of the point of the book, is to talk about what makes us uncomfortable, why it makes us uncomfortable, hence, you know, why he feels invisible.
I mean, she addressed it beforehand, being like, you know, be prepared for, you know, what you're about to read. Like, it's gonna be, you know, maybe a hard to read or hard to understand right now, but it is important to the story. But yeah, she just gave warnings before, and then, like, as we kept reading, we said, okay, this is really important because it, you know, addresses some things in the book and, you know, some viewpoints that people have.
I, you know, point out or go to the parts that, you know, may be a little more disturbing or uncomfortable, but I don't reread it out loud. I mean, there are some things that, yeah, they're uncomfortable for a reason, but the point of it isn't necessarily like in chapter 2 when, there's that story that this man shares of, what's going on in his family dynamic. I don't need to reread that word for word, but I talk about why does he tell that story? What is the purpose of telling that story?
Like in the beginning with, I forgot, I think it's True Blood. It addresses how like the white man views every black man as, someone that they can help or someone that's, in need. So when they saw that he was he had a troubled past, he's like, oh, let me give money to him because he needs his help. And because he was in that box of black people need help, they're lesser than, so I can do whatever I can to help them. And I'm a good person because I helped him. So I feel like it addresses how, they were just viewed as less than, and that, the white man can do whatever they can to help them, but it's really out of own selfish intent.
I found out from other teachers. It's a Facebook group. Someone commented on this Facebook group for Loves Park community group, and I'm not a part of that. I don't honestly spend a lot of time on social media anyway, so some teachers showed me the comment because it said my full name, so it was pretty apparent that it was about me in particular and the subject. I'm the only one that teaches this book. I, at first, kind of found it just a little comical because of the accusations that don't reflect me as a person or my teaching at all. And then, you kind of go through some of the roller coaster of emotions. Then I was mad, and then I was a little upset, but I didn't stay upset for a while. I just had to realize that that comment really isn't about me. It's about that individual's own issues, naivety to the subject. They weren't in the classroom. That little piece that was taken out of context, completely out of context, isn't even the main focus of the story. We will never escape the realities of what goes on in the world, especially with social media, the news, whatever. I mean, kids have access to all of that all of the time. So I don't think it's fixing any problems. I think what people need to remember is that the educators who choose these books take time to consider why this book is important in the classroom. And I just wish people, or I hope people will, think about that teachers, educators, we always have the best interests of the kids in mind, always. So we're not just picking a book because we want to cause waves or make waves or, make people upset. There's purpose. And I just wish people would trust that a little bit more. So I don't think removing the books is going to be the answer for anything.
That they didn't really fully read the book or really understand it. Because, it does have parts in it that may be viewed as vulgar or like a little filthy, but the overall book and what it stands for is beautiful. And I feel like if that's what they got out of reading the book or what they got out of the book as a whole, then I don't really think they understood what he was really writing about.
Yeah, you can't, literally, don't judge a book by its cover. You can't judge a book by one chapter. You have to judge it in the entire context of the book. You can't just read one chapter, one sentence, one paragraph of a book and say, wow, this is offensive. I don't like it. It shouldn't be read by anyone. Well, first of all, that's your own opinion. That's how you feel about it. What you feel shouldn't determine how everybody else feels about it. That's a you problem, personally. Like if there was something that I read that I really didn't like, I wouldn't go around telling people not to read it. I'd just be like, oh, personally, it wasn't my style. I wouldn't read it again. But that doesn't mean I'm going to go and say this shouldn't be read anywhere. It's not my place to say that.
I love the book, so obviously I wouldn't have found, a great story that addressed a lot of things that I think should be addressed. But also, I mean, like knowing that there are books out there like that are banned, just because of, you know, maybe some things in it that people don't like, makes me think like how many good books are there that people can't read just because they want to censor what we see nowadays or what we view, which I don't think is right. So I'd say I'd be sad because, you know, I got to see something and read a book that was actually interesting and addressed things that I can see in my real life every day. Yeah, I mean, because the book doesn't only address, like, it's not just about how, like, black people are affected, but how everybody can be viewed as invisible. You can be viewed as a tool. You can be viewed as this. Nobody can really see how you are, or that you're, like, actually a true person that has a heart, you know? People can view you as a tool to get what they need or as a means to move forward. But, you know, I feel like nowadays people don't really connect with people truly. It's very the pushback, and they don't really want to see that person for who they are. It's like, what can they do for me? So I'd say like that's still happening to this day, and the book addresses that very well.
I think some people believe that ideas are dangerous, and that if you can just limit people's access to ideas, you maybe can control what they're thinking. And I've always thought that, you know what, it's okay to read about ideas that you maybe agree with and maybe don't agree with. And particularly in like your teen years, you're at the age where you're maybe trying out values that aren't your parents' values and kind of deciding, okay, which of my parents' values do I agree with and which do I don't agree with? And you're kind of building your own value system. And for me, that's one of the coolest things about working with high school kids, as seeing those gears turn as they kind of develop. This is what I believe. And particularly, I want to say like 10th grade is like the perfect age where kids are like really like all the gears are clicking at high power, and they're like, oh, this is what I think, this is what I don't think, and then kind of being able to evaluate things for themselves.
I think that it is up to the parents' discretion what they want their kids to read, but only what they want their kids to read, not other kids. They can't control other kids. It should not be up to one parent to say, none of these kids should read this stuff. That is between you and your child. And I will also say that those kids will find that content elsewhere. Unless you have their phone locked up, you have them locked in a black room, they're gonna find it somewhere if they wanna look for it. And that's just a hard truth that not a lot of people are willing to accept. That you're not gonna be able to block content that you don't want from your children's minds. And also, sheltering a child from, I shouldn't even say a child, an adult. We're about to be adults. I'm an adult. I'm in high school. Sheltering high school kids from real world topics like sex, rape, anything along the lines of that is not going to help them in the real world. It's just going to leave them sheltered. It's going to leave them with too many questions when they're older, and it could lead them to doing things that you don't want them to do. So I think having these conversations with your kids is better than not having these conversations and trying to shelter them from it, trying to close their eyes to things that happen out in the real world, things that are happening around them all the time. They need to know about this.
As a mom myself, I completely understand not wanting to expose your children to certain things and topics. However, I also understand the reality that you can't hide from these things forever. The world is what it is. These things happen, unfortunately. So I use that more as an opportunity to have a conversation with my child than just to shelter them. Is there certain material or content that's more appropriate for certain age groups? Absolutely. This book should not be taught in really, any other grade level besides, I would say, junior or senior level. And I would argue that really a college level course like AP is really where it fits the best.
I feel like Invisible Man is important because of the bigger social issues that it raises, and it does so in a pretty profound way. And including those sorts of issues is to be expected if it's a reflection of society as it is. And I don't think that inclusion is to be titillating or anything like in that nature, or to encourage pedophilia. It is reflecting society as it is. The newer policy morphs like our old policy and the language from the state, so that we still require that the book goes to a committee. We still require that the book remain in circulation pending a challenge. Committee makes a recommendation, and then that recommendation goes to the superintendent. The new policy, and this is coming from the state, requires that the final decision be made not by the school board, but by the superintendent working in conjunction with their attorney. New legislation was passed, and I got to be there when they signed it, that requires that schools don't ban books, and if they do not receive their state library grant. I think there is some truth in the fact that if you control the narrative and you control the information people have access to, you have a way of rewriting their history and making their lives narrow and small, and not in a good way. And so, yeah, it is someone trying to control your access to information. And I'm very much a believer that, like, even if you don't necessarily agree with ideas, there is no harm in exploring the ideas. Some of the reading I'm doing right now, I find the topics like really difficult and yucky, but it doesn't mean I'm going to shy away from learning about that, because just saying I don't like that doesn't help me to like understand really why I don't like it.
We would live in the world of 1984 if that was the case. So, it would keep people from maybe knowing things that whoever is censoring, the government or whatever it is, from knowing and understanding, and just keeping them naive to a lot of topics and issues in the world.
It could go two ways. It could either get better or it could get worse. And I really don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what the future brings on that. I would hope it gets better and not worse.
I would say if it's not addressed by society, if it's not addressed by the people, it would 100% get worse, as it has been. If we don't stand up for what we believe in, what we want to preach about and talk about, then yeah, it's going to get a whole lot worse. But it comes from the people speaking up against what they believe. Yeah.
Optimistically, I have hope in my generation. I know there's not a lot of people that have hope in the generation coming up, but I think that my generation knows how important it is to receive true information and not block information on media, news networks, newspapers, all of that stuff in schools. So I think as we grow up and we gain more control, we gain more of a voice in our world, that censorship will dwindle and there will be a new era where media is free, news is not as widely spread, or I should say fake news is not as widely spread, and there's a better way to receive information.